don't talk about it much here on the channel in terms of my gameplay or tips or anything like that, but Blackout is a huge part of what I love about Black Ops 4. I play Blackout almost as much as, if not maybe even more than multiplayer depending on the day, and so therefore I've kind of withheld on some of my best tips and all things considered with Blackout and how to make you a better player for quite some time now. We haven't done a video like this on the channel, and whether or not you're somebody that just got the game brand new Black Ops 4 for Christmas, or if it's somebody that's been playing since launch and maybe even beforehand with the beta and all things like that, I'm gonna give you guys some of my tips here today on how to be the best Black Ops player possible, how to win more games, how to get more kills, and all things that go along with that. So today we're gonna talk about 25 tips for Blackout in particular. So that said, let's just jump right into it because there is a lot to talk about. First tip, let's start out with, we're gonna go in sort of the progression of how the match will go on throughout the time. So first things first, let's talk about early game. Firstly, whenever you jump out of the helicopter, hot drop if you're comfortable with it, or if you're not necessarily too comfortable with a gunfight immediately, or however many people may be landing at a location that will be very populated, maybe stretch if you're not really into that thing. There are a bunch of points of interest that are definitely going to be contested almost every single drop, some things being like construction, some things being like firing range, depending on where that drop zone is, Nuketown Island being another one if it's over there, and as of recently, the big one was Hijacked, in which you probably saw clips of 30 to 40 people going there whenever it was first launched on day one. So that was something that, of course, you might not be comfortable with that, but if you end up stretching to things like, say, Turbine even though that's a point of interest, not many people go there, and of course, there are unnamed locations around the map that can get you looted up and ready to go as well. Definitely try those if you're not into the idea of having a gunfight in the first 5, 10, 15 seconds, but that comes down to personal preference. Then whenever it comes down to once you actually land, find the necessities first. The big things that come out of that, of course, are a weapon of some sorts, especially in a hot drop. Even if it's a pistol, as long as it's something, you have at least a step up on the guy that may have just landed right next to you and not found anything. Additionally, find things like the backpack for doubling your inventory space, healing of some sorts, the best of course being medkits and traumas, but even if you only find bandages, that's totally fine as well. Armor is absolutely crucial, even if you don't find the highest of a level 3 right off the bat, even a level 1 will definitely help out early game and for those early engagements, and then 1 or 2 utility items right off the bat. The rest, like attachments and the plethora of utility items you can pick up as the game progresses, those aren't necessarily as big a necessity as just simply landing and finding what you need to survive right out of the gate. The third tip to give you is kill then loot, especially early game. Like I'm talking first 15 to 30 seconds here. It of course makes sense to secure your kill late game and then loot afterwards because obviously that's how you end up getting it, but I'm talking more so don't try and look for the perfect items. Don't look for a Paladin and a Maddox rifle combo right off the bat before you end up taking the first engagement. Whatever you find, if you land and find a VKM or an RK7 and there's a player that landed right next to you, take them out, because one big thing with BRs is loot distribution. So you're never going to be guaranteed a perfect loadout every single time you land, so if you can end up taking out a kill and picking up the person's loot that they had, then go for it. The quicker the jump you have on somebody and the earlier you push them, the more likely they're going to be unsuspecting or not ready for that gunfight. So as long as you can capitalize, you're in the clear. Next tip, if you end up landing at a point of interest that has a zombie spawn and stash there, if you land there, chances are you're going to be looking to capitalize on that mystery box loot. Make sure that you know your surroundings, and the best tip that I can give for these specific locations is try and find a combat axe and kill the zombies with that rather than your actual weapon. 1, it doesn't waste ammo, and 2, you don't give away your location to anyone in the near area because you're not firing off and making a ton of noise. The combat axe is relatively silent. The only noise that it'll make is the zombie's death noise, but unless you're right on top of a zombie, you won't really hear that. So you won't bring much attention to yourself, and it will help you greatly in clearing out an area and getting that secured loot from each stash. And talking about stashes, know your stash locations, not only just your zombie stashes. When you take a look at it, there's a great utility that's updated on a regular basis, that being the website blackoutmap.com, and it showcases the entire map, the locations of vehicles, stashes, achievements, challenges, underground locations, and more. It's pretty much everything you can imagine that helps you memorize and know where stash locations, while they won't be permanent, they'll be on rotation, it'll help you know where to look for them and give you a better indication on how you can end up securing them. In terms of finally, when you end up getting enough time to actually loot and look for exactly what you want, the preferred loadouts that I'd end up giving here are a couple of rifles and a sniper for long range if possible. Early game, things like your shotguns and SMGs are fantastic, but a lot of the times, come mid to late game, the rifles will do just fine in those scenarios, and a lot of times you'll also be at longer distances than that of right on top of somebody as you would be early game. Now for this, my big preferred ones are the ICR, the Maddox, and the KN57 and or the brand new SWAT. Those Those are great rifles and are fantastic for not only recoil control, but also the DPS they end up inflicting in a gunfight. And for a long-range engagement, you're gonna want something that can perform at a distance. While you can end up taking a long range with a scope of, say, the ABR-223, that's actually pretty solid at range in the right hands. You definitely want a sniper. Of course, there are the snipers of the Outlaw, the SDM, the Koshka, as well as the Paladin, but for all-around usefulness, the Paladin is by far my favorite choice here. It's got the most damage, it has the fastest bullet travel time, if I'm not mistaken, and it can do the most against armor naturally. So in terms of leading your shot and also how much damage it inflicts, it's the best option here on the table. Next up, perks are your friends, but only some of them. There are a few that I don't really ever use, and outside of very small situational engagements, I don't really find to be that useful ever. Things like that, including Brawler. Reinforced is one of the ones that's teetering on the edge there, especially as of recently with the concussion spam that has happened as of late. Outlander's one of those ones that unless you're just late to every zone, I don't think that I have ever found much use for out of it. I've probably used it twice since the beta even, not even just since launch. But your perks like Awareness, Dead Silence, and Paranoia, those are the ones that to me are the biggest and most crucial in taking. Because not only one do perks take up an inventory slot and there's no stacking of them, but Awareness, Dead Silence, and Paranoia are the big three that I love because one, you can end up hearing, again, if you have a headset that's absolutely massive, gives you the situational awareness to be able to recognize where a player is coming from and be ready for that gunfight. Dead Silence kind of allows you to negate the ability of somebody hearing you and being ready for a gunfight. And then Paranoia, if you're clearing a field or something like this in mid to late game, that's absolutely insanely useful to know where somebody is going to be aiming down sight at you. It activates and gives you an audio cue that somebody is aiming at you as soon as they scope in on you, and so therefore you can have that extra second or so to slide or dodge out of the way and get ready to know where a gunfight is coming from at a distance or maybe even on top of you. Next up, vehicles are worthwhile and have a varying number of useful traits. To me, the big ones are the ARAV and the truck, but I primarily play solo. In squads, those can of course be helpful, but the helicopter might be thrown in there as well. So to me, the boat is probably the least helpful of vehicles and is only going to be taken when it's the absolute last choice that I have. The ATV is great for quick escapes and especially if you need to outrun the storm, but whenever you come to mid and late game, I would not have that around at all because there's no protection offered. The helicopter is solid and gives you the fastest mobility possible, but obviously you limit yourself in the engagement that you can take, and plus you're wide out in the open because there's no cover once you end up getting in those unfriendly skies. The truck and ARAV are perfect for solos in my book. The truck can outrun the zone and it's armored, you can drive around and if somebody shoots you, you're still protected. And then you can also drop items in it in the back as well. So if you come across, say, 2 level 3 armors or something like that where it's absolutely a must-have you end up getting, you can end up placing one in the back and equipping one so you have one for spare use. The downside to the truck is that it's a bit slower and on hills it can be harder to make it up sometimes, but then that's where the ARAV comes in because that to me is the most useful. There's not many spawns, only about 3 to 4 per match, but it's got the protection of an armored truck, the speed just under what the ATV is, and it has a machine gun, so it's pretty awesome when you think about it in all sorts of engagements. The next tip is to patrol the perimeter. This cuts off most chances of getting killed by behind if you're ending up rolling in with the zone and taking out people as they come in with it as well, and especially just from the amount of engagements you may potentially take. If you're situated dead center in the circle, you'll have to account for a full 360 degrees worth of potential engagements instead of cutting that roughly in half if you're at the edge of the zone or rolling in with it. You only have what is probably about 180 degrees at most to account for, which in most cases just one simple swipe of either your mouse or of your right stick on console. So playing the perimeter not only gives you the people that come in as stragglers and play a little more passively and therefore might not be as aggressive in gunfights, but it also allows you to minimize the most potential for taking shots in the back or getting picked off on your own. Next up, audio is absolutely key. For those that already use a headset while gaming, you know that audio is huge in giving you situational advantages. To be able to hear your opponent coming gives you the first few seconds of being able to prepare for that gunfight, whereas your enemy may not be prepared at all, so thus giving you the advantage. To me, I play on the audio sensitivity of Super Crunch. It sort of gives you a mix of everything. That comes down to personal preference, but even if you don't have a headset, it might not be the most viable for a lot of players, but if possible, play with the volume high enough that you can discern the environmental audio from player audio and try to learn the different audio cues that come along with that. Take advantage of it because it will definitely help you out in the long run. Outside of that, pick and choose your healing wisely. To me, I go for medkits over first aid almost every single time. I hardly find myself picking up multiple stacks of bandages now at this point. I only go for medkits and traumas if possible. So while you can stack 10 first aid bandages, medkits of course will stack up to 5, but if you can end up having say 2 stacks of those medkits, it'll be more worthwhile in gunfights. You've regained double the amount of health back at a time, so that's absolutely absolutely crucial in a gunfight, and stacking them is absolutely huge. If you can, I'd definitely take 2 full stacks of medkits, so 10 total, and then perhaps 1 trauma at a time, and that frees you up to about 8 other inventory slots for utility and perks. Also, one thing to note is your current healing slot doesn't cost you an inventory slot as it's on hand and not in your backpack. So even if you end up taking 3 stacks or 15 meds, you'll still be able to have 8 additional inventory slots. And while we're talking about inventory, allot your inventory properly. Ammo does not cost you, nor do armor scraps, but things like utility of sensor darts, concussions, cluster grenades, among other things with perks, those all will count against your inventory slots. Ideally, have an assortment of all of them. Concussions can stack in 2 per inventory slot, but things like cluster grenades and regular grenades are only single carry and are slots of their own. So ideally, I'd like to carry, say, 2 concussions, 2 grenades, and a few perks like dead silence, awareness, and paranoia, for the most part, mixing in with some other items that, say if I find a scope for a sniper I'm hoping to pick up, I'll have that in my backpack as well as some maybe additional healing. And kind of tying into the idea of finding your ideal inventory, being a loot goblin can kill you. Don't stay in an area too long, don't stay in a loot bag too long after killing somebody, and of course, don't go for something that might end up getting you killed. Because if you end up, say, taking out somebody with no cover out in a field, if you go and try and loot that, chances are there's a good possibility that somebody else is watching that and waiting for you to go in and be stationary while you loot. So knowing when to pick and choose when to get loot is absolutely crucial. And while we're talking about looting, one big thing to also note that will definitely help you out is knowing your ammo types. Whenever you go and loot, especially on console, looting is not really optimized all that well. If you play on PC, sure, it's absolutely much easier to loot a dead bag and get in and get out of a situation without really having to put yourself into too much risk. You can kind of just get in and get out. The console isn't as streamlined, and therefore you have to cycle through a lot of items in a not so optimized way. So if you know what type of ammo you need to refill or to end up picking up for the weapons you're using, simply picking those up are definitely the biggest help. Instead of having to pick up every single ammo type, it'll shave off a few seconds that you're out in the open and vulnerable. And on the topic of bullets, knowing your bullet drops is absolutely helpful as well. Bullet velocity and travel time are a thing in Blackout, where unlike MP, Blackout is a ballistic system rather than hit scan, so you're gonna have to account for leading shots and the distance that it takes between 2 targets. In closer engagements, it's not as much of a problem. It's almost like you have hit scan in place, but once you get towards 50 meters and up, you'll definitely notice. So higher powered snipers don't have as much bullet drop and as much time to get to a target as you may anticipate, unless you get to very far ranges, but with practice you'll start to notice which bullets travel fastest, which you have to lead more, and so on and so forth. But keep that in mind when you go into engagements. And while we talk about engagements, confidence in your shot is absolutely key. Blackout is all about situational awareness, and the more info that you know about the surrounding map and the locations, the better. But that also said, the more advantageous it is for your opponents if they know where you're at. So unless you know that you're going to get a kill on somebody running by at a distance, or you know that you'll be able to hit that snipe, maybe hold off and keep that information on where a player is until you can move in a little closer and secure that kill. I think about this all the time when I'm at construction, because that's roughly 9 levels of play across a huge open area, and there's bound to always be another player there. So if I'm not securing the kill at a distance, sometimes best not to give my presence away. Also, definitely something you should know, keeping in mind as well for late game, is that the same thing applies. You want to be able to know where players are and take them out, but you also don't want to give away your position too much, because once you're in that late game, of course, you want to secure the win. The next big thing is aim higher. Headshots are absolutely huge, especially with the most recent armor update, because you can repair armor, so people running around with level 3 are absolutely going to happen. So the more that you're gonna doing actual damage to the body and the multipliers that come along with that, rather than just having armor sponge your shots, the better. So aiming higher is absolutely key. Headshots are a huge thing that helps out in Blackout. Situational use of perks is also something that should be considered as well, reinforced for late game, paranoia for trying to get across the map in an open field, dead silence and awareness late game as well. Those are absolutely things you want to keep in mind that are great to use right off the bat, but keeping them in your pocket is also something you need to gamble on as well. If you think you're going to get to late game and can use them better there, definitely try and do that. Additionally, D-pad quick inventory is huge as well, especially for things like the situational use of perks. Try and adjust to managing that a little bit if you're not somebody that likes to go into your start menu all the time. Even I have a scuff and still have to play claw for a few seconds while changing items over in my inventory, but after some practice it gets insanely easy and of course insanely useful to be able to toggle what is in your inventory and available to use immediately right then and there. One big thing that even I'm guilty of not doing all the greatest is that if I'm playing with a team, utilize your coordinates. One of the biggest mistakes that I see see a lot, and even that I also do, is general callouts like over there or behind us. But while some, given your chemistry with the team, can actually be advantageous, most won't be. So the more specific you can be, the better. So if you can call out something more specific, such as diner when referring to diner by Nuketown, that works, but for most engagements, it won't be that simple. So if you can end up saying things like South 195 at the top of the hill, or at trees at 110, then that'll help give your team a better advantage of reacting to a gunfight. And when in Battle Royale, where timing and quick pace can be absolutely everything, the sooner you can spot and react to a gunfight, the better chances you'll have in surviving that attack. And coming down to our final 5 tips here with this, the next one being know your zone. Firstly, make sure that you're aware of the zone perimeter, where you should be and how you want to approach it. Early game, you can't outrun zones, so make sure you give yourself time to put distance between you and the coming zone. And while things like Outlander can be your friend, if you know you're going to tank some damage, it's best to avoid any altercation with the zone at all. And secondly, know the rotations. And by this, I mean that if you're already safe, be aware of hot locations where players could be coming out of zone, because the last thing you want to do is feel safe if you're already in zone before the zone is fully collapsed. The moment that you light up is the moment that you end up getting shot in the back by somebody coming out of zone. For a lot of gunfights, high ground is absolutely key. Of course, it gives you a little bit of that advantage that you have some cover, whereas the angle isn't straight on, so therefore you have some sort of high ground that gives you an advantage. You can step back and have some seconds to react or heal if need be, whether that be a building or even just the hillside, but high ground is absolutely key. You look down on your enemy and you can take them out with a lot more ease than that if you were on equal playing ground or if you were on the low ground. Also, make sure you pick up all armor scraps possible, and with the most recent armor updates, these are absolutely crucial and help you way more than you can imagine. Repairing your armor and staying alive is absolutely something that helps out, so take as many as possible. And on the topic of armor, pick up armor off dead bodies even if you put damage into their armor in your gunfight. If they have a better armor than you, repair it and keep going. Chances are the enemy will have armor scraps as well, and more to replenish what you end up using to repair that armor that may be a higher tier, so use what you have to fix it and then get on your way. The best possible scenario obviously is if you find a level 3 armor on a dead body, you can replenish it and get that durability back up to full. And one final fun tip here is that if you have the sitting down emote, the tranquility emote, that's one of my favorites because it blocks your hitboxes if you're in cargo trucks and playing in squads. You'll definitely want to do that. You make some noise and players will be onto you, and so therefore, if you can end up sitting down while moving, it's absolutely a huge advantage to have. Now, come late game, you can end up utilizing all of these factors to help you win. That high ground is key, situational awareness and the use of perks is absolutely crucial. Knowing where your enemies are, even if you don't shoot at them immediately, having the best loadouts possible of, say, a rifle and a sniper are fantastic. Utilizing your tacticals and utilities of a concussion or a trophy system, clusters, all that kind of stuff comes down to the final gunfight, so you may as well use that. And all those things that make you be a smarter player, use them all. So if you use all these, I think you can definitely become a way better player at Blackout than you may be right now. And of course, as you progress on and use more of these, you'll start to develop your own tips and things that work out for you. So that said, we're gonna wrap it up. An absolutely massive video here today. So thank you guys for sticking around so long if you did so. And of course, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Is there anything you'd like to add to this list? Anything you'd subtract? Whatever it may be, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, multiplayer, Blackout, zombies. We got you covered the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, best class setups, all that good stuff. We got you covered. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it is, links in the description below to both those. But finally, thank you guys all so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care. Go get some victories out there. Until next time, peace.